The first wolf had recovered and was circling. Move, Matthias, she thought, desperately. He got to his feet, but his movements were slow, weary. His heart wasn't in this fight. His opponents were grey wolves, rangy and wild, but cousins to the white wolves of the Furin North. Matthias had no knife, only the bloodied rock in his hand, and the remaining wolf prowled the area between him and the pile of weapons. The wolf lowered its head and bared its teeth. Matthias dove left. The wolf lunged, sinking its teeth into his side. He grunted, and he hit the ground hard. For a moment, Nina thought he might simply give in and let the wolf take his life. Then he reached out, hands scrabbling through the sand, searching for something. His fingers closed over the shackles that had bound his wrists. He seized them, looped the chain across the wolf's throat, and pulled. The veins in his neck cording from the strain. His bloody face was pressed against the wolf's ruff, his eyes tightly shut, his lips moving. What was he saying? A Driscoll prayer? A farewell? The wolf's hind legs scrambled at the sand. Its eyes rolled, frightened whites showing bright against its matted fur. A high whine rose from its chest, and then it was over. The creature's body stilled. Both fighters lay unmoving in the sand. Matthias kept his eyes closed, his face still buried in the creature's fur. The crowd thundered its approval. The ladder was lowered, and the announcer sprang down, hauling Matthias to his feet and grabbing his wrist to raise his hand in victory. The announcer gave him a little nudge, and Matthias lifted his head. Nina caught her breath. Tears streaked the dirt on Matthias's face. The rage was gone, and it was like some flame had gone out with it. His North Sea eyes were colder than she'd ever seen them, empty of feeling, stripped of anything human at all. This was what Hellgate had done to him, and it was her fault. The guards took hold of Matthias again, pulling his shackles from the wolf's throat and clapping them back on his wrist. As he was led away, the crowd chanted its disapproval, clamoring more, more. Where were they taking him? Nina asked, voice trembling. To his cell to sleep off the fight, Kaz said. Who will see to his injuries? They have medics. We'll wait to make sure he's alone. I could heal him, she thought. But a darker voice rose in her, rich with mocking. Not even you can be that foolish, Nina. No healer can cure that boy. You made sure of it. She thought she would leap from her skin as the minutes burned away. The others watched the next fight, Muzzin avidly flexing his fingers and speculating on the outcome. Inez silent as a statue. Kaz inscrutable as always, scheming away behind that hideous mask. Nina slowed her own breathing, forced her pulse lower, trying to calm herself, but she could do nothing to mute the riot in her head. Finally, Kaz gave her a nudge. Ready, Nina? The guard first. She cast a glance at the prison guard standing by the archway. How down? It was a barrel turn of phrase. How badly do you want him hurt? Shut-eye. Knock him out, but don't actually hurt him. They followed Kaz to the archway through which they entered. The rest of the crowd took little notice, eyes focused on the fighting below. Need your escort? The guard asked as they approached. I had a question, said Kaz. Beneath her cape, Nina lifted her hands, sensing the flow of blood in the guard's veins, the tissue of his lungs. About your mother, and whether the rumors are true. Nina felt the guard's pulse leap inside. Never can make it easy, can you, Kaz? The guard stepped forward, lifting his gun. What did you say? His eyelids drooped. You don't. Nina dropped his pulse, and he toppled forward. Muzzin grabbed him before he could fall as Inez swept him into the cloak Kaz had been wearing, just moments before. Nina was only mildly surprised to see that Kaz was wearing a prison guard's uniform beneath it. Couldn't you have just asked him the time or something? Nina said. And where did you get that uniform? Inez slid the madman's mask down over the guard's face, and Muzzin threw his arms around him, holding him up as if the guard had been drinking too much. They deposited him on one of the benches pressed against the back wall. Kaz tugged on the sleeves of his uniform. Nina, people love to give up authority to men in nice clothes. I have uniforms from the Stab Watch, the Harvard Police, and the livery of every merch mansion in the Gilt Strat. Let's go. They slipped down the passageway. Instead of turning back, the way they'd come. They moved counterclockwise around the old tower, the wall of the arena vibrating with voices and stomping feet to their left. The guards posted at each archway paid them little more than a glance, though a few nodded at Kaz, who kept a brisk pace, his face buried in his collar. Nina was so deep in thought that she nearly missed it when Kaz held up a hand for them to slow. They rounded a bend between two archways, and were in the cover of deep shadow. Ahead of them, a medic was emerging from a cell, accompanied by a guard, one carrying a lantern. "He'll sleep through the night," the medic said. "Make sure you drink something in the morning and check his pupils." I had to give him a powerful sleeping draught. As the men moved off in the opposite direction, Kaz gestured his group forward. The door in the rock was solid iron, broken only by a narrow slot through which to pass the prisoners' meals. Kaz bent the lock. Nina eyed the crude iron door. "This place is barbaric." Most of the better fighters sleep in the old tower," Kaz replied. "Keeps them away from the rest of the population." Nina glanced left and right to where bright lights spilled from the arena entryways. There were guards standing in those doorways, distracted maybe, but all one needed to do was turn his head, and they were caught here. Would the guards bother giving them over into the Stad Watch for trial, or would they simply force them into the ring and be eaten by a tiger? Maybe something less dignified, she thought bleakly. A swarm of angry voles. It took Kaz a few quick heartbeats to pick the lock. The door creaked open and they slipped inside. The cell was pitch black. A brief moment passed, and the cold green glow of the bone light flickered to life beside her. Inej held the little glass sphere aloft. The substance inside was made from the dried and crushed bodies of luminous deep-sea fishes. They were common among crooks in the barrel, who didn't want to get caught in a dark alley, but couldn't be bothered to lug around lanterns. At least it's clean, Nina thought, as her eyes adjusted to the gloom, barren and icy cold, but not filthy. She saw a pallet of horse blankets and 2 buckets placed against the wall, one with the bloody cloth peeking over the rim. This was what the men of Hellgate competed for: a private cell, a blanket, clean water, a bucket for waste. Matthias slept with his back to the wall. Even in the dim illumination of the bone light, she could see his face was starting to swell. Some kind of ointment had been smeared over his wounds. Calendula. She recognized the smell. Nina moved towards him, but Kaz stopped her with a hand over her arm. "Let Inej assess the damage." "I can," Nina began. "I need you to work on Muzzin." Inej tossed Kaz the crow-headed cane she must have been hiding beneath her grey imp costume, and kneeled over Matthias's body with the bone light. Muzzin stepped forward. He removed his cloak and shirt and the madman's mask. His head was shaved, and he wore prison-issue trousers. Nina looked at Matthias, then back to Muzzin, grasping what Kaz had in mind. The 2 boys were about the same height and the same build, but that was where the similarities ended. "You can't possibly mean for Muzzin to take Matthias's place." "He isn't here for his sparkling conversation," Kaz replied. "You'll need to reproduce Halvar's injuries. Inej, what's the inventory?" "Bruised knuckles, chipped tooth, 2 broken ribs," Inej said. "3rd and 4th on the left." "His left or your left?" Kaz asked. "His left." "This isn't going to work," Nina said in frustration. "I can match the damage to Halvar's body, but I'm not a good enough tailor to make Muzzin look like him. Just trust me, Nina." "I won't trust you to tie my shoes without stealing the laces, Kaz." She peered at Muzzin's face. "Even if I swell him up, he'll never pass. Tonight, Matthias Halvar, or rather, our dear Muzzin, is going to appear to contract firepox, the lupine strain, carried by wolves and dogs alike. Tomorrow morning, when his guards discover him so covered in pustules that he's unrecognizable, he'll be quarantined for a month to see if he survives the fever, and to outwait the contagion. Meanwhile, Matthias will be with us. Get it?" "You want me to make Muzzin look like he has firepox?" "Yes, and do it quickly, Nina, because in about 10 minutes, things are going to get very hectic around here." Nina stared at him. What was Kaz planning? "No matter what I do to him, it won't last a month. I can't give him a permanent fever. My contact in the infirmary will make sure he stays sick enough. We just need to get him through diagnosis. Now get to work. Nina looked Muzzin up and down. This is going to hurt just as much as if you'd been in the fight yourself, she warned. He scrunched up his face, bracing for the pain. I can take it. She rolled her eyes, then lifted up her hands, concentrating. With a sharp slice of her right hand over the left, she snapped Muzzin's ribs. He let out a grunt and doubled over. That's a good boy, said Kaz, taking it like a champion. Knuckles next, then face. Nina spread bruises and cuts over Muzzin's knuckles and arms, matching the wounds to Inej's descriptions. I've never seen firepox up close, Nina said. She was only familiar with the illustrations from books they'd used in their anatomy training at the Little Palace. Count yourself lucky, Kaz said grimly. Hurry it up. She worked from memory, swelling and cracking the skin on Muzzin's face and chest, raising blisters until the swelling and pustules were so bad that he was truly unrecognizable. The big man moaned. Why would you agree to this? Nina murmured. The swollen flesh of Muzzin's face quivered, and Nina thought he might be trying to smile. Money was good, he said thickly. She sighed. Why else did anyone do anything in the barrel? Good enough to get locked up in Hellgate? Kaz tapped his cane on the cell floor. Stop making trouble, Nina. If Helvar cooperates, he and Muzzin will both have their freedom just as soon as the job is done. And if he doesn't, then Helvar gets locked back in the cell, and Muzzin still gets paid. And I'll take him to breakfast at the Couperon. Can I have waffles? Muzzin mumbled. We'll all have waffles, and whiskey. If this job doesn't come off, no one's going to want to be around me sober. Finished, Nina? Nina nodded, and Inej took her place to banish Muzzin to look like Matthias. All right, said Kaz. Get Helvar on his feet. Nina crouched beside Matthias as Kaz stood over her with the bone light. Even in sleep, Matthias's features were troubled. His pale brows furrowed. She let her hands travel over the bruised line of his jaw, resisting the urge to linger there. Not the face, Nina. I need him mobile, not pretty. Heal him fast, and only enough to get him walking for now. I don't want him spry enough to vex us. Nina lowered the blanket and went to work. Just another body, she told herself. She was always getting late-night calls from Kaz to heal wounded members of the Dregs who he didn't want to bring around any legitimate medic. Girls with stabbing punctures, boys with broken legs or bullets lodged inside of them. Victims of a scuffle with the Stadwatch or another gang. Pretend it's Muzzin, she told herself, or Big Bolliger, or some other fool. You don't know this boy. And it was true. The boy she knew might have been the scaffold, but something new had been built upon it. She touched his shoulder gently. Helvar, she said. He didn't stir. Matthias. A lump rose in her throat, and she felt the ache of tears threatening. She was pressed a kiss to his temple. She knew that Kaz and the others were watching, and that she was making an idiot of herself. But after so long, he was finally here, in front of her, and so very broken. Matthias, she repeated. Nina? His voice was raw, but as lovely as she remembered. Oh, saints, Matthias, she whispered, please wake up. His eyes opened groggily, palest blue. Nina, he said softly. His knuckles brushed her cheek. His rough hand cupped her face tentatively, disbelievingly. Nina? Her eyes filled with tears. Shh, Matthias, we're going to get you out. Before she could blink, he had hold of her shoulders and had pinned her to the ground. Nina, he growled. Then his hands closed over her throat.